Laken Riley, the University of Georgia college student who was killed by an illegal immigrant in February, made headlines again this week as her murderer's trial concluded with a guilty verdict and life without parole sentence. Good riddance. But as details of her case began to circulate online, the conversation has moved past the initial right-wing outrage over the illegal immigrant factor to a broader discussion on women's safety in public places. Laken was attacked while running in broad daylight in a highly visible area and was even captured on camera before she was jumped. According to trial details, she fought for her life for a cruel 17 minutes.
Laken Riley took more precautions before her last run than I have ever taken on any run that I've ever been on, and her case has completely shifted my perspective on safety while I'm running, especially as a female runner. And last night, I'm at Duke University right now. I was driving through campus going to my hotel, and I saw a girl running in the pitch black, and I couldn't help but think about how vastly unsafe that is for so many different reasons. And I think about the fact that when I go on a run, it's never in the dark, and I feel like there's always people around, and people have my location, but not everybody always knows when I'm going on a run, and I always justify not carrying anything to keep me safe because I feel like if I'm out in the daylight and there are people around, I will be okay. And what happened to Laken is proof that even in broad daylight, even when you take all the precautions, things don't always go the way they're supposed to be. And I don't know what about this case has made me so drawn to it, but I don't know what the correct answer is, but as a woman and as someone who has a tiny platform, I know that I have to start taking precautionary methods when I go out, because it has been proven time and time again that even in broad daylight, women are not safe, and they're not safe doing their hobby, and they're not safe doing something that makes life better. It's just been cyclical in my head ever since I found out about it, and now that the trial is happening, and it's crazy, and it's unfortunate that women don't have safer options, and I hope that everybody is taking this case incredibly seriously, and if you see something, listen to it and really digest it, because she did everything right and always did. And to think about the amount of times I've ever gone on a run and someone didn't know, or I didn't have something with me, it really just changes your whole perspective.
That girl is absolutely right. Laken seems to have done everything you could possibly think of to protect yourself on a run, short of arming herself. But it seems that she was being tracked by her friends and family. She was in communication with them. She was, again, in a very visible area. It was the middle of the day. She was able to call 911 from her phone in the midst of the attack. It is very difficult to point to anything else she could have possibly done, again, besides carrying on a run. And I think it is this fact that has so many women tuning into this case. Because while Laken's case has received national headlines due to the immigration status of her attacker, it is hardly an outlier. And let's be so serious. As a woman, outside of the political arguments here, it makes no difference to me or the rest of women in this country whether the person harming us has a green card or a US birth certificate. Today, I want to talk about the casual violence women are facing in the streets of our cities every day in this country, how we can best defend ourselves, and the policy changes that need to occur so that we no longer have to deal with this crap. First, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics. Welcome to my channel where I bring you my politically homeless takes on politics and culture. Before we dive in today, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and of course, ring that notification bell so you never miss one of my episodes. I think I can speak for all women this week when I say I'm pissed. For those of you who are newer to me, I have a pretty extensive background working on issues like this. When I first got involved in public policy around 2014, I was more of a happy little neocon, traditional Republican. I had very tough on crime views that were in no way informed by any experience anywhere close to the justice system. When I first began volunteering as a lobbyist for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, I quickly came into proximity with that system due to the extensive overlaps that exist between the prison population and the jail population and the mental health system and that population in our country. And it was during this time that my views began to evolve, not because I do not have a mentality of being tough on people who hurt others, but more so because I realized how rife with injustice and abuse the system was and how stupid many of the policies under the tough on crime moniker actually are. I then went on to work in criminal justice reform for a period of years. I was a national leader in the death penalty repeal movement and overturned the death penalty in 3 states in 3 years. That's where I really started to gain most of my national presence. So I have done extensive work on this. I have a whole episode discussing the reasons I became opposed to the death penalty, why I don't actually think it's tough on crime, why I actually think the death penalty and other programs like it lead to more violence because they suck up resources that don't actually make us safer, and they tend to prioritize a few outlier cases while the vast majority of criminals get away. That's not tough on crime. So all that to say, I have not only been on board with the criminal justice reform movement, I have been a leader in it, and I stand by that work. But the problem that I have today is that elements of the left on the progressive side have taken that movement off a cliff. And they truly have not been focused on coming behind the reforms and instituting better policies that would ensure we really do clamp down on real criminals. I am on board all day long with ensuring that we are not putting people in prison wrongfully, with ensuring people who have not committed real crimes do not go to jail or prison in this country, which happens far too often. We put too much of an emphasis on things like drug crimes versus actually solving violent crimes. But where they have lost me is on this stance that has allowed criminals, violent people, people who are ruining our cities, people who are threatening public safety, to go free and to tell the rest of the country, the rest of the population, that we just have to deal with it. And if we don't want to, then we're bigots and we're racist and we're hateful and we don't care about poor people. The way the criminal justice system predominantly works in this country, even when you have more tough on crime politicians and bureaucrats who are in charge of it, is that typically most people get slap on the wrist after slap on the wrist after slap on the wrist. And then when they finally escalate to doing something truly heinous, the system comes in and is tough on crime. And that's exactly what we saw with Laken's killer. Jose Abira and his wife first illegally crossed into the country around 2022, according to reporting from Alive News. Abira's wife told the New York Post he was making food deliveries in New York City about a year later when police in Queens arrested him for endangering her 5-year-old son. He was riding on the back of the moped without a helmet, according to reporting by the outlet. At that point, Immigration and Customs Enforcement could have taken Abira into custody, but according to a written ICE statement, he was released by the NYPD before a detainer could be issued. Released, and also seems to have been given a large number of taxpayer-funded handouts, including bus tickets from the border to New York City in the first place, housing once he got to New York City, and eventually a plane ticket to help him relocate to Georgia. The report goes on to note that by that time, Abira's brother Diego was living in Athens, and it was only about a month after Abira's arrest in New York that he and his brother were accused of stealing from a Walmart in Athens. According to the police report, the two allegedly took bacon, smoked sausage, cheese, and some clothes. They were given a citation for misdemeanor shoplifting and let go. A spokesperson with the Athens Clark County Police Department said, "Our officers do not have immediate access to immigration status. According to ICE's 287 program, the general process of identifying and removing non-citizens with criminal or pending charges arrested by state and local law enforcement agencies is handled during the booking process by the law enforcement agency responsible for the jail." But notably, they didn't book him, because everybody has just let shoplifting go at this point. Like, it is absolutely insanity to me. That is a crime. I would argue it's a violent crime. When you are perpetrating a harm against someone's physical body or their business that they depend on for subsistence, that is a very, very serious offense. I cannot believe the state of this country where we're at with shoplifting. Lock all these people up. This is not even difficult. Oh, God, as the report goes on to note, since Abira wasn't arrested, that check wasn't done, but Abira's brother Diego had been arrested the month before on a DUI charge and still had not been deported. The Clark County Sheriff's Office sent its policy on its communication with ICE. It indicated that prisoners identified as undocumented aliens should not be detained solely on the basis of being an undocumented alien, but that otherwise ICE would be notified and it would be up to ICE to determine whether to request custody. So there were numerous checkpoints where both of these guys should have been caught and dealt with and probably deported. I am very pro-immigration. I have argued extensively for immigrants, for the sentiment we have towards immigrants in this country, to reforming our justice system and taking it back to more of an Ellis Island style approach. I have spoken out extensively against Trump's border camps, but this is insane. This is why the left has absolutely lost this issue. It has lost the plot entirely, because this whole approach to immigration over the past 4 years is not kind. It's not kind to American citizens. It's not kind to the immigrants who are trying to come here legally. It's not even kind to the illegal immigrants who are coming here illegally but still living peacefully when you don't deal with thugs like this. You absolute imbeciles. And what was even the goal here? I'm truly trying to figure out what their big brain chess game was here, because illegal immigrants can't vote. Okay. You have to be a citizen for 5 years to vote in this country. And yes, I know that some people will say that they can get around some of that in places like California, but that was never going to skew the election for Democrats. So what did Democrats think they were going to do by running this kind of an immigration system for 4 years that pissed off absolutely everybody except for the thugs who cannot vote for you? This is why a significant portion of the Hispanic population and Latino population went and voted for Trump. Most immigrants do not commit crimes, by the way. In fact, they are less likely to commit crimes than natural-born citizens. But when you allow people like this to go scotch-free, you ensure that entire population will be marred by their activities. And things like having a DUI, driving drunk, which, by the way, my brother and sister-in-law, while she was pregnant, were hit. They had a terrible wreck in Alabama by an illegal alien who was a drunk driver who did not have insurance. They were in the hospital. They had medical bills. It was very, very serious. They could have been killed. Their baby could have been killed. These are not low-level offenses. These aren't small crimes. I'm so sick of people minimizing them. And if you want to come here as an immigrant, then you need to be above scrutiny, okay? Plenty of others will take your place if you can't cut it. Yes, make it easier for people to come here. Make it easy for large amounts of people to come here. I am pro-immigrant. But the minute you cannot keep your nose clean, get them out of here. We do not have to put up with additional criminals coming to this country. We have to deal with the ones we have. We don't have to deal with them. But for the record, this slap the wrist, let them go, slap the wrist, let them go until they kill somebody and then all of a sudden throw the book at them. This is not just a problem within immigration. This is pervasive in our system at large.
I'm still kind of in shock because this just happened to me, but I went to the UPS store. I dressed my dog up as a USPS worker to take her to see the guy Ray at the UPS store, who's her best friend in the city. He always gives her treats, and I put her in the costume and I was walking her there. And this homeless man in a wheelchair just stood up and punched me in the chest. And I don't know what I did wrong. He just stood up, and now I'm home and I'm fine. Physically I'm completely fine, but I just don't even know what I'm supposed to do in a situation like this, because this man just fixated on me. He was saying fuck you, fuck that bitch. And then I was scared to get back in my car, ran with my dog back into the car, and am I supposed to file a police report? I don't know what I'm supposed to do in a situation like this, because I'm totally okay. I'm shaken, and I'm scared he's gonna do it to someone else. He's just sitting outside the Stop and Shop. Chicago was fucking crazy sometimes.
In the comments of this girl's video, there's all these people being like, why didn't you call the police? You should call the police. Call the police now even. You cupcakes, they aren't gonna do anything. Their jails are overflowing. They don't know where to put these people, even if they do go and arrest them. We have too many people incarcerated, period. We are the number one incarcerator in the entire world. It is insane, the number of people that we lock up, but it is worse at the county jail level, which is where these kinds of people would be taken to. They simply cannot keep them all. And the sheer volume of cases that they're dealing with on top of that, it just results in quick releases for low priority offenses. They're just trying to process stuff as fast as they can. Not only that, but even if they do go and arrest them, the law is not really on the side of us. It's on the side of the people who are doing these kinds of things. Like, courts have ruled over and over that homelessness in and of itself is not a crime, and policies that criminalize it can violate constitutional rights. So if someone is acting erratically but not committing a clear crime, it's often difficult for them to justify detaining them. Like, this is the exact same thing. I brought this up a few weeks ago that I had happen in New York City, where the guy was following me around and being aggressive and I couldn't shake him. And like, my typical reaction would be to sort of bow up, but I'm in New York City. I've been stripped of my right to defend myself. I'm by myself. I'm alone in the street. I don't know that any other bypassers are going to intervene. And I don't know if I bow up against him, if he's going to like whip out a knife and stab me, because he's clearly crazy. He's clearly deranged. But had I called the police in that situation, they would have told me there was nothing they could do. I would have had to have let that man hurt me before something would happen, even though he was very clearly a present danger to me and everybody else in his path that day. The pushback on the war on poverty went too far, plain and simple. You've got cities that have started intentionally shifting away from arresting individuals for behaviors that are associated with homelessness, like loitering or minor property damage, and they're avoiding trying to like criminalize poverty, which, like, when we started this whole thing, there was a big point to it, right? But there is a difference in saying police should not spend their days stalking people around town and ticketing them because they have a broken taillight, which probably they have a broken taillight because they can't afford to fix their taillight, right? There's some common sense reforms under that needed to happen that were good ideas. But again, it got taken way too far and driven off a cliff by anarchists and other people in the communist movement who don't believe in prisons. They want prison abolition. They're absolutely off their freaking rockers. And now you've got it to a point where police cannot even deal with people who actually are a menace to society and who do pose a harm to people because we have come in and said that that's criminalizing poverty. You also have a problem to grapple with here, which is that many violent or threatening incidents involving individuals like this, they're in the throes of a mental health crisis or they're under the influence of drugs. And law enforcement has become increasingly reluctant to arrest someone whose behavior stems from those issues, especially if there are not treatment options available to send them to, because we have prioritize that. And I think to some extent that's a good thing, right? I don't think that putting people in jail for addiction is going to solve it. In fact, it often compounds the problem. It gives them new people to do drugs with. It helps them learn how to make drugs. Like they can still get drugs in the prison. So it's not an easy solution. Same thing with people who have mental health issues. Sending them to diversion courts and mental health courts can be a good alternative option to jail, where their issues just going to get worse and we're going to spend $30,000 plus a year to simply house them there while that problem is getting worse. But that only works if there is an alternative to send them to. And since there's not, since that hasn't been built up at the same rate as we see these problems amplifying in society, instead, just nothing happens to them at all. And they're just left to roam free and wreak havoc in society. I recognize the gray area here. I would say civil liberties are my very top concern above all other things that we discuss in a political system. I am a staunch civil liberties advocate. I will always err on the side of civil liberties and freedom over security and safety. But there is a line here that we are missing. And I've often said this is my grayest area of public policy, but while I think it's gray, I don't feel any hesitancy in where I'm at on it, which is that we have to be able to institutionalize people who are clearly a threat to themselves and others before they harm people. I don't think it should be the first step. I don't think that it should be something that is without checks and balances. I certainly would not lobby for bringing back the old system of institutionalization where there was so much corruption, so many issues. But I do think there is an in-between zone we have to start striving for. There are simply people who refuse to get sober, who refuse to take responsibility for their mental health, who refuse to take the handout that is being offered to them, right? And that's how I feel about the homeless population. I don't have a lot of sympathy here. There is so much help. There's so much money for people who fall on hard times in this country. If you do not take advantage of that and find a way to get back on your feet, you are the problem. I'm okay with a small social safety net, but it needs to be small. It should not be for an extended period of time. And if you refuse to be an adult, if you refuse to actually become a full citizen and participant in society, I don't think you should get to just run all over everybody else and ruin their days, ruin their cities, ruin their lives, and put them in danger. Like, there actually is a line. I often have libertarians in my comments saying, like, as long as they don't violate the NAP, the non-aggression principle, for you normal people listening to me. But that's kind of the line libertarians use, is the person doing something that is a aggressive action against somebody else that harms somebody else's person or their property. And if they haven't done that, then the state doesn't have any right to intervene. But I would argue these people, these homeless people, these vagrants, these immigrants who are living like this and behaving like this, they are violating the NAP. They are destroying public property. They are carrying out bodily functions in the streets. They are cussing at people and threatening them and harassing them. There has to be a line before these kinds of people physically harm someone where we intervene. It is inexcusable to insist that society live like this because these individuals refuse to take self-responsibility.
I'm so done with public transportation in Chicago, and the bus driver is not giving a flying fuck anyone that's on the bus. Like, I understand it's not their job, but like, I get on the bus and I sit in the back, and this man comes on after me, and he's like, get the fuck up, move. So I get up and I move closer to the front because I'm like, whatever, I just don't make eye contact, I don't acknowledge him. And then I'm sitting there, and 2 seconds later he chucks his iced coffee at me, and it's all over my coat and my pants. So at this point I'm like confused and I'm scared, so I just don't know what to do. So I just sit there, and then he starts yelling, and he moves and he sits right next to me, and he's like yelling in my face, and I don't know what to do. So I get up and I move next to someone. I'm like, hey, can I sit next to you, to this random person? And they're like, sure. So then he takes soy sauce packets out of his fucking pocket and starts chucking them at me, and then he starts singing Silent Night, and he's screaming Silent Night in my face. And I'm like trying not to cry at this point because I'm like, I'm fucking scared. I don't know what this guy's gonna do. He's throwing shit at me. He's yelling in my face. The bus driver's doing nothing. No one's acknowledging me. But I didn't want to get off because I'm, number one, so far from my house. Number two, I didn't want him to follow me because then I'd be even more scared. So I just ride there and I sit there, and he's screaming in my face for like 5 stops. And then I'm like, this, I can't do this anymore. The girl next to me was getting off. I'm like, I'm getting off because no way I'm getting off with no one else. So I just got off, and now I'm fucking 500 miles from my apartment, and I don't want to get back on the bus. It's not coming for 25 minutes, and Uber's $30, so I'll be walking home in the blizzard.
I wanted to provide a quick PSA for my friends in New York, particularly my female friends. Guys, please stay vigilant right now. I know we always hear that. I know you always assume it's not going to be you that something happens to, and then it is, and it really stirs shit up. I was on the subway platform on the 23rd and 8th stop CE line headed downtown last night around 10 o'clock and was assaulted by a man. He came up to me. I was waiting for the train and came up to me and threw a liquor handle at my head. Fortunately, I'm fine. Somehow I'm not concussed, which is honestly insane. Just have a big old bump on my head. But man hasn't been caught. There's an open investigation. We know how these things go. I don't have a lot of faith that they will find him, but yeah, just a PSA if you're in that area, on the train in that area, or any area of the train for that matter, I think it's important to have a reminder to just stay extra aware of your surroundings. I am someone who's lived here a long time. I consider myself very spatially aware when I'm out and about. But unfortunately, some things just feel unavoidable. And I think this was one of those scenarios. He seemed to have come from out of nowhere, completely unprovoked, obviously. So yeah, stay vigilant, stay aware. Thanks.
3 people are dead following a chilling stabbing spree on the streets of Manhattan Monday. Officials say the 51-year-old homeless man, Ramon Rivera, allegedly attacked without saying a word to his victims. Watch this surveillance video coming up here where you see him put a large knife in his pocket just minutes before the first attack. He allegedly stabbed a 36-year-old construction worker a little before 8:30 in the morning. Then 2 hours later, a 68-year-old man was attacked while fishing. Both men died shortly after the stabbings. Then just before 11 a.m., a 36-year-old woman was stabbed multiple times near the United Nations headquarters. She later succumbed to her injuries. A cab driver who witnessed the third attack followed the suspect and alerted an officer. Police say they found 2 bloody kitchen knives on Rivera and that his clothes were covered in blood. Guys, police say Rivera had 8 prior arrests. His arraignment is expected sometime today.
Like, enough is enough, dude. I won't even take public transportation or walk around in these cities anymore, Atlanta included. Fortunately, Atlanta is a very decentralized city. We don't really ever go downtown other than for sporting events here. But like the last time I had to for a doctor's appointment, I literally saw a homeless man walking around in traffic in the middle of a busy Atlanta street, not wearing any pants. And I do mean not wearing any pants. We all pay far too much in taxes to live like this. And it isn't kind or empathetic to the people who are living like this either. The deinstitutionalization movement in this country was an abject failure, and I think it's time that we admit that. For the record, that timeline dates back to about the 1950s and 1960s when you started seeing policy shifts beginning. I often hear Ronald Reagan blamed for this. I'm going to touch on that in a minute. Like, he was involved, but it goes back way further than that. It actually traces back to the Community Mental Health Act of 1963, which was signed by JFK, and that aimed to replace large state psychiatric hospitals with community-based mental health care centers. The thinking at the time was that you were seeing a lot of advances in psychiatric medicine, and so that was making it possible to treat many mental illnesses outside of institutional settings. You also had some legal decisions that were coming down around that time. You had a landmark court case in the 60s and 70s, Wyatt versus Stickney and O'Connor versus Donaldson, that established that individuals could not be institutionalized involuntarily unless they posed a danger to themselves or others, leading to a reduction of asylums. And then you had a lot of state level policies where states began closing their psychiatric hospitals and shifting resources to outpatient care. Now, Reagan did play a role when he was governor of California from 1967 to 1975. He signed the Lanterman-Petraeus Short Act, and that limited involuntary institutionalization in California. Obviously, that was done to protect civil liberties and end indefinite commitments. It was done with the best of intentions, and there are these problems there. I'm not ignoring that. But what ended up happening is that many individuals with severe mental illness were released from institutions without adequate community care, contributing to the homelessness epidemic we now live with. And then you had budget cuts during his governorship that further weakened California's mental health care system. So yeah, like I think they were right. They needed to overhaul the system. A lot of people that were institutionalized should not have been. It was very difficult for them to get out. They could be institutionalized for reasons that were corrupt, like their husband just didn't want them anymore. But what they did instead was completely get rid of the system and push these people out into the streets where there was no market-based alternative ready to pick up the pieces. In an ideal world, that's what would have happened, but they didn't have their strategy laid out very well. So no, Reagan did not close all of the asylums. The closure of these institutions was a gradual process spanning decades and involved various presidents and court decisions and state policies. But at the end of the day, deinstitutionalization was often poorly implemented. While large asylums were closed, the promised community-based centers were underfunded or never fully developed, and this left many people without care. Now, notably, obviously, deinstitutionalization led to a significant increase in homelessness and incarceration among people with severe mental illness. And without sufficient community services, many have continued to fall through the cracks to this day. So that's how we got there. The question is, how do we get out of it? And I would say the two things we need most are to first and foremost bring down housing costs and bring down mental health costs. And both of those are high for one reason and one reason only. And if anybody says capitalism in my comments, I'm going to drop a mic on them. No, they are expensive because of bad government policies that have limited supply while inflating demand. I have a comprehensive video I'll put in the show notes about that scenario when it comes to housing costs. I don't know that I've done one on mental health care costs. Maybe I should do a deep dive on that for you guys soon, but trust, it's about the same. I will link an in-depth video on how government broke the healthcare system at large, and you can extrapolate those same principles to the mental health system, particularly if you want to dig into that. But those two things have to change, okay? You can't just throw money at this problem, and you cannot just lock all of these people up. But if you address those two facets, the good people who are currently falling through the cracks, who have just happened to fall on hard times, they will be able to pull themselves out of them. And then we as a society can better proceed with dealing with the bad eggs. And I think for those people, institutions do need to come back with many more rigorous checks and balances, with a lot more accountability. It really needs to be something we spend a lot of time and put a lot of mentality and intentionality to, but it has to happen. I also think actual crimes need to be treated seriously the first time. And in the meantime, women, you have to start caring, okay? Nobody is coming to save you. The police are certainly not coming to save you. The men are not coming to save you. You have to stand up and defend yourself. Thank God you live in a country that still has Second Amendment rights. I think a lot of women, especially left-wing women, have been reconsidering their anti-gun stances given the results of the election. I've seen a lot of them talking about the need to arm themselves. And while I think their reasons are, a little bit hyperbolic when it comes to Trump, like, I'm still applauding it. Yes. Arm yourself, okay? Take a safety class, learn your equipment, get very comfortable, get a holster. There's really nice ones that wrap around your waist that you can just put it right there while you're running or walking or running errands or what have you. That is the only thing that actually makes you equal to a man. That's why as a feminist, I am so rabidly pro Second Amendment, and move out of cities that are stripping you of your ability to defend yourself in that way. Places like Chicago and New York, I don't think it's smart for young women to live there right now. I'm sorry. It sucks. They're wonderful cities. I lived in New York City for a short time period, but given where we're at right now, it's just not a choice I would make. The US was set up as a bunch of mini state laboratories so we could see which policies work and which ones don't. Oftentimes, you do have to vote with your feet, as we've seen people doing in response to California's ridiculous economic agenda. The same thing's going to have to happen with some of these awful blue cities, their terrible approaches to crime, and their awful, awful violations of your right to defend yourself. All right, guys, I hope you liked this episode. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and if you want even more content, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok.